A random act of kindness that changed the world. A story about the power of small gestures. In a small, bustling city, there lived an unassuming man named Tom. Tom was a quiet soul who kept to himself, working long hours at his modest job as a janitor in a local high school. Life had not always been kind to him. He had lost his family at a young age, and the years had taught him to expect little from the world. Tom didn't have many friends, nor did he expect anyone to notice him. But he found peace in his routines, quietly observing the world around him from the background where he had always been comfortable. One particularly cold winter evening, as he was finishing his shift, Tom noticed an elderly woman struggling to push a shopping cart filled with bags. Her hands were trembling from the cold, and her face was a mask of exhaustion. Without a second thought, Tom walked over to her and offered to help. "Oh, thank you, dear," she said, surprised and grateful. "I'm not as strong as I used to be, and my children, well, they don't visit often." They walked together for the next few blocks, talking softly. She shared stories of her youth, and Tom found himself smiling, enjoying her tales and the warmth they seemed to bring. When they finally reached her apartment, she gave him a small hug and thanked him again, her eyes welling with tears. "You've done more than you know," she whispered. "Today I felt invisible, but your kindness reminded me that I still matter." Tom didn't think much of it at the time. It was a small gesture, nothing extraordinary, he thought, but he walked home feeling lighter, wondering if maybe for once he had truly made a difference in someone's day. The next morning, the elderly woman, Mrs. Albright, shared her encounter with Tom at her local community center, where she attended weekly knitting gatherings. Her friends listened, each touched by the kindness of a stranger. One of the women there, a wealthy widow named Linda, was so moved that she decided she wanted to pay it forward. That afternoon, she anonymously paid for all the groceries of a struggling single mother in line behind her at the grocery store. The young mother, Sarah, was taken aback by this unexpected generosity. That night, as she tucked her daughter into bed, she felt a renewed sense of hope. She decided she wanted to spread the kindness she had received and do something meaningful for others, even if only in small ways. The next day at work, Sarah brought coffee for her entire team, knowing how tired they all were from working long shifts. She left little notes of encouragement for each of her co-workers, reminding them of their strength and the good they brought into the world. One of her co-workers, Liam, had been struggling with depression and was feeling particularly down that day. Sarah's note was the glimmer of light he needed, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Liam decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He called his old friend Hannah, who had drifted away during his dark times. He poured his heart out, sharing his struggles and how much he missed her. The call rekindled a friendship that both had missed dearly, and Hannah, inspired by Liam's honesty and vulnerability, decided she wanted to bring joy to others as well. Know you've been a good friend. The very next day, Hannah volunteered at a local animal shelter, spending her afternoon caring for abandoned animals who needed love and companionship. One of the visitors to the shelter that day was a young boy named Ethan, who was there with his father, hoping to adopt a dog. Hannah helped them find a dog who had been overlooked for months, a scruffy, shy mutt named Rocky. Ethan and Rocky bonded immediately, and the once shy dog found a new home with a boy who had always dreamed of having a best friend. Ethan's father, Michael, was moved by the kindness and dedication he saw in the volunteers and decided to organize a fundraiser for the shelter to help support their work. Michael was a successful businessman, and with his connections, he raised more than enough to fund the shelter's needs for the next year. The impact of that fundraiser rippled further than Michael ever imagined. Inspired by the generosity of the donations, the shelter expanded its services, providing therapy animals to local hospitals. One of the therapy dogs brought comfort to a young woman named Maya, who was recovering from surgery after a long illness. Maya had been feeling hopeless and afraid, but the dog's gentle presence reminded her of the simple joys of life. Touched by this moment, she decided that once she recovered, she wanted to work with therapy animals to help others the way she had been helped. Months later, Maya began volunteering at a hospital as a therapy animal coordinator, visiting children's wards and helping families who were going through difficult times. Her kindness and compassion inspired countless families, and her work became a beacon of hope for those who felt overwhelmed by their struggles. And so the ripple of kindness spread further, reaching people who never knew the story behind it. Over the years, this chain of events would touch countless lives, weaving its way into the hearts of strangers, families, and communities. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, carried the original spirit of Tom's simple gesture forward. And while he was never aware of the vast ripple his one act had caused, the world around him was forever changed by his unassuming kindness. Back in his small city, Tom continued his life as he always had, unaware of the enormous impact he had made. But every so often, he would help someone carry a heavy bag, or offer his seat to someone who looked tired, and each time he felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of peace, knowing he could make someone else's day just a little bit easier. And though he never knew it, the world had become a little bit brighter because of him. Years passed, and Tom's life continued much as it always had. Every morning he would rise before dawn, pack his small lunch and make his way to the school where he had worked for decades. He lived in the same modest apartment, still kept to himself, and had no idea of the profound wave of kindness that had blossomed from his single, quiet act on that cold winter night. One bright spring day, as he was cleaning the halls of the high school, the principal approached him with a smile. "Tom," she said, a twinkle in her eye, "we have a little surprise for you in the gymnasium. Why don't you take a break and come with me?" Confused, Tom set down his mop and followed her down the hall. As they approached the gym, he could hear muffled whispers and laughter. When he opened the door, he was met with a sight that left him stunned. Dozens of students, teachers, and staff stood there applauding and cheering, holding up a huge banner that read, "Thank you, Tom." In the middle of the crowd stood a young woman in her 20s, holding a bouquet of flowers and a framed photograph. She stepped forward, and as she neared him, Tom realized she looked vaguely familiar. "Hello, Tom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You might not remember me, but I'm Sarah, the single mother you helped one winter night by paying for my groceries when I was struggling to make ends meet." She smiled, and Tom's eyes widened in recognition. He remembered the woman now, a fleeting moment of kindness he had all but forgotten. Sarah's eyes glistened as she continued, "I don't know if you understand the impact of what you did that night. I was at my lowest, feeling hopeless, and your small gesture gave me a sense of dignity and warmth. It inspired me to spread kindness in my own way, and I wasn't the only one. The people you touched through me and others, well, they're here today. We wanted to come together to show you just how far your kindness reached." Sarah gestured to the crowd, and people began stepping forward one by one to share their stories. A man named Liam approached, explaining that a simple coffee Sarah had bought for him led to a heartfelt conversation that saved his life during a time of deep depression. Then Hannah, a woman Tom didn't recognize, shared how she had been inspired to volunteer at an animal shelter after reconnecting with a friend who was lifted up by Tom's initial act. Another woman, Maya, described how her encounter with a therapy dog from that very shelter had inspired her to start a hospital program for patients dealing with critical illnesses. Tom listened, overwhelmed, as person after person spoke. Each story painted a picture of lives uplifted, of second chances and rekindled hope, all set in motion by that one winter night when Tom had simply helped an elderly woman with her groceries. The most surprising moment came when an elderly man stepped forward and introduced himself as Michael, Ethan's father. "When we adopted Rocky, the dog that Hannah helped us find, we had no idea that he would become a therapy dog. He helped heal my son, and that healing spread into our community through Maya's work. Tom, because of you, Our town now has one of the largest therapy animal programs in the state. It all traces back to you." Tom's heart swelled with a mix of awe, gratitude, and disbelief. He had always thought of himself as a simple man, someone who led an unremarkable life. But now, he was seeing the far-reaching branches of his single act, how kindness had cascaded outward, touching lives he could never have imagined. The crowd then presented him with a special plaque, a certificate from the city mayor that declared that day as Tom Richards' Kindness Day. The gym filled with applause as Tom looked down at the plaque, shaking his head in amazement. As the applause died down, Sarah spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tom, you changed our lives. You showed us that kindness doesn't have to be loud or grand to matter. You taught us that a small act can be the beginning of something extraordinary." The day ended with a celebration. People lingered, talking and laughing, many of them taking turns to speak with Tom, sharing stories of the ripples his kindness had set in motion. As the crowd thinned, Sarah approached Tom again and handed him a small, wrapped gift. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures of all the people his actions had impacted, families reunited, therapy animals comforting patients, smiling faces of volunteers, and notes of gratitude from countless people. At the back of the album was a single handwritten message. "To Tom, the man who reminded us that we all have the power to change the world. One small act of kindness at a time. Thank you for being our light." As Tom walked home that night, the sky was a deep, peaceful blue, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees. He clutched the photo album close to his chest, his heart full. That simple man, who once thought he was invisible, now knew that he had changed the world in ways he never could have dreamed. From that day on, Tom continued his life, still helping others in small ways. But now, he carried a new sense of purpose, knowing that even the smallest gestures can plant the seeds of miracles. His story became a beacon, spreading far beyond his city, inspiring others across the country to live with compassion, reminding the world that sometimes all it takes to change someone's life and the lives of countless others is one small act of kindness. Months passed after the celebration, and Tom settled back into his usual routines, though he carried a deeper sense of gratitude and fulfillment each day. He thought often of the people who had shared their stories with him, those lives that had somehow been touched by his one small act. But something strange began to happen that he could never have expected. One evening, while Tom was returning home from his shift at the school, he noticed an unmarked letter slipped under his door. Inside was a simple note written in elegant handwriting. "Sometimes the smallest sparks light the greatest fires. Keep an eye out, Tom, the world still needs you." Confused but intrigued, Tom pocketed the note, wondering if it was just a prank or maybe a kind gesture from someone in the community. The mystery stayed on his mind for days, but soon enough, life returned to its familiar pace and the note was nearly forgotten. A few weeks later, on an early Saturday morning, Tom received a knock at his door. He opened it to find a well-dressed stranger in a dark suit, holding a sealed envelope. The man introduced himself as Nathan, an attorney from a nearby city. "I don't mean to surprise you, Mr. Richards, but I represent an individual who wishes to remain anonymous. They've heard your story and were deeply moved. They want to make you an offer," he said, handing Tom the envelope with a knowing smile. Tom opened it carefully. Inside was a formal letter stating that he had been chosen to receive an extraordinary opportunity, a substantial grant to fund acts of kindness across the city, however he saw fit. All that was asked in return was for him to continue his simple way of helping others, but now, with greater resources at his disposal. Incredulously, Tom looked up at Nathan. "Is this some sort of joke?" he asked, half laughing in disbelief. Nathan's eyes softened. "Not at all, Mr. Richards. Sometimes the world needs reminders that kindness still exists. And people like you, the quiet, the humble, you are the ones who inspire true change. All that's asked is that you keep doing what you do, help others, and watch the magic unfold." Overwhelmed, Tom agreed. and so began a new chapter in his life. With the anonymous funding, he started small organizing community meals, providing scholarships for local children, and helping refurbish rundown playgrounds. Everywhere he went, he saw the ripples of joy spreading, his actions once again inspiring others to pay it forward. But soon, Tom noticed something unusual. People he didn't recognize started approaching him on the streets, thanking him for acts of kindness that he had no memory of doing. At first, he thought they had mistaken him for someone else, but as more and more strangers shared their stories, Tom realized that someone, somewhere, was spreading kindness in his name. Determined to find out who was behind this, he began his own quiet investigation, asking around the community, trying to follow the trail. Then, one night as he was about to lock up the school after a long day, he caught sight of a figure slipping a note under his office door. Quickly, he hurried to catch up, calling out, "Hey! Wait! Who are you?" The figure froze, turning slowly to face him. It was a young woman, no older than her mid-20s, with a familiar smile and warm, compassionate eyes. She walked back toward him and extended her hand. "My name is Lily," she said softly, "and believe it or not, I've been waiting a long time to meet you." Tom shook her hand, his mind spinning with questions. "Do I know you?" he asked, trying to piece together where he might have seen her before. Lily gave a gentle nod, pulling a folded photograph from her pocket. She handed it to him, and Tom's heart skipped a beat when he saw it. It was a picture of an elderly woman, Mrs. Albright, the woman he had helped with her groceries so many years ago. "Mrs. Albright was my grandmother," Lily explained, her voice wavering with emotion. "She told me all about the man who helped her that winter evening. She said that your kindness was the light that kept her going through her hardest days. She wanted me to know that even small acts could change someone's life. When she passed, she left me her savings and asked me to use them to help others, just as you helped her." Tom stood in stunned silence, the weight of her words settling over him. He had no idea that the ripple from his small act so long ago had come full circle. Lily continued, "I knew I wanted to continue what you started. I used her gift to spread kindness in your name because I wanted the world to know that people like you exist, that there are people who change lives without expecting anything in return. And now, I want to join you." Over the following months, Lily and Tom worked side by side, creating a network of kindness projects throughout the community. Together, they inspired more people than they ever could have alone. The city began to change in remarkable ways. Volunteer groups formed, strangers helped each other, and businesses even started donating a portion of their profits to fund the community initiatives Tom and Lily began. But the true magic happened when their story spread beyond their small city. News outlets picked up their story, and soon, kindness initiatives began cropping up in towns across the country. People shared stories of how they had been inspired by Tom's one small act, how they had found hope through the kindness of strangers. Years later, when Tom was well into his 80s, the local government declared an annual Kindness Day in his honor, celebrated on the anniversary of that cold winter night when he had first helped Mrs. Albright with her groceries. The legacy of his kindness, carried forward by Lily and countless others, had changed not only their city, but had become a movement, inspiring thousands of people worldwide to believe in the power of small acts of goodness. And so, a single quiet man's story became woven into a grander tale, a reminder that sometimes the smallest spark can ignite a fire bright enough to light the entire world.